This is Field Notes from the Proving, short reflections from inside the process of building a life that's earned, not perfected, earned. January always has a strange reputation. Everyone treats it like a clean slate, new year, new me, new goal, new habits, new life, new whatever. But January doesn't actually feel like a fresh start, in all honesty. It's cold, it's dark, it's long, and that's exactly why it matters. Because if a new life is going to start anywhere, it has to start with the hardest month in order to begin. For me, January was the setup month. The night before the year started, December 31st, New Year's Eve, I had written down my goals, the life I wanted, the changes I wanted to make, the direction I wanted to move in. January was the month where those ideas had to turn into systems. Not the motivation, not inspiration, systems. If I really wanted my life to change, January had to be the proof. And what better month to start in January, in the cold, dark, dreary month of January. And at the start of a new year, you have a whole new set of problems. But at the same time, you solve the exact same problems that you had before. The difference is that you suddenly have what feels like an infinite amount of time ahead of you. 12 months, a full year, 365 days. And if you're serious about changing your life, that's more than enough time. January became the month where I started building the systems that would carry for the rest of the year. And the systems were something I understood. It's something I've always fallen back on when I always wanted a real change. And people sometimes associate systems with the formula, the old version of myself. But I never saw systems really as the problem because to me, systems are just the structure, and structure is what leads or makes transformation possible. To me, January was always the test. If you can build it in January, you can build it in any month. One of my goals for 2025 was simple: run a half marathon in January. But as you know, that goal quickly expanded into something bigger because I committed to running one half marathon every month. And on top of that, I'd already signed up for the Shamrock Marathon in March. So January really became the proving ground. This is where the first test of whether the systems I'd written down on December 31st were real or just another list of ambitions. And almost immediately, the training started to accelerate. I remember looking at my watch one day and realizing something that honestly shocked me. By January 17th, I was already running 11 miles. 11. Which at the time felt insane because just months earlier, I wasn't even sure I can run a half marathon. And now suddenly, the training had moved to a point where my body was doing something I'd never done before. But what made it even more interesting was how the AI running coach started responding. The app would analyze the run and would say things like, "Great job," or "You're progressing," or "You're ready." And there was something weirdly powerful about that because it meant the system was starting to recognize me as someone capable, someone experienced, or someone who could do this. And I loved that feeling. Not because the AI was validating me, but because it reflected something that I was starting to believe about myself. That maybe I was someone who could actually do difficult things consistently. And there was another layer to this that made January even more interesting. Because when I wrote down my goals on December 31st, I didn't just write down that I wanted to run a half marathon. I wrote down a time. I wrote down that I wanted to run a 1 hour and 30-minute half marathon. And at that point, I only run the distance twice, and my time was closer to 1 hour 50 minutes, which meant the goal I'd written down wasn't just an improvement, it was a massive jump. 20 minutes off from 1 hour 50 to 1 hour 30 across 12 races, across 12 months. And at the time, I remember thinking something very simple, that if I'm going to do these 12 times, one of them has to be legendary. One of them has to prove something, that maybe I wasn't just someone who could finish races. Maybe I could actually become fast. January was about proving something to myself, that nothing was going to get in the way of these goals. In all honesty, nothing was going to slow them down. Nothing was going to derail them. These goals were mine because they were impenetrable. The days were short. The weather was cold. Most mornings were dark, but I made that decision. I was going to run outside. I was going to let the freezing air hit my lungs. I was going to feel the cold in my face. I was going to run no matter what because the goal wasn't comfortable. The goal was commitment. Unless it was snowing or pouring rain, I was running outside. And even if it was snowing or raining, I still had a plan. I would get on the treadmill. I would still do the workout because the rule was simple. The system does not break. The commitment doesn't change, and I will not let myself down. But something subtle was also happening at the same time, something I didn't fully understand yet. The AI coach wasn't just encouraging me, it was measuring me. Every run had data, distance, pace, heart rate, performance scores, training readiness, recovery metrics. And while those things started as helpful feedback, they slowly began shaping how I saw myself. Because when the system says you're doing well, you feel successful. And when the system says you're behind, you start to question yourself. At the time, though, I didn't see really any danger in that. All I saw was proof. And I thought it was assistance, quite honestly. Proof that I was doing what mattered, proof that I was improving, proof that the system I started in January was actually working. And January was really about building momentum through cold mornings, dark afternoons, long runs on empty sidewalks. New routines were forming, new discipline forming. Nothing about it, in all honesty, was glamorous whatsoever. No big celebrations, no real finish lines, just the quiet repetition of showing up. But that's where something important began to change because the systems I'd built on December 31st were no longer just goals. They were becoming habits, and habits slowly become identity. I feel like people love to talk about transformation like it happens in a single moment, like a breakthrough, a finish line, a dramatic turning point. But most real change takes months, and they begin in months like January, cold, dark, and ordinary. Just the slow repetition of the work you said you were going to do, but just done over and over again until eventually you realize the person doing the work is no longer the same person who wrote down those goals back in December 31st.